Missing Link? More like missing theater numbers. Oh, God. I shouldn't joke about that. So Missing Link is the 5th film brought to us by Laika, the studio that brought us Paranorman, Coraline, Kubo and the Two Strings, and I guess to a lesser extent the Box Trolls. The movie's about Lionel Frost, voiced by Hugh Jackman, who is a monster hunter who likes to hunt legendary creatures all over the world and wants nothing more than to be part of an explorers club run by a bunch of snooty old men. He discovers Bigfoot, voiced by Zach Galifianakis, who tells Lionel that he may be the only one left of his kind and wants him to take him to the Himalayas to find the Yetis because he feels like that's the only place left in the world where he belongs. Along the way, they're joined by Adelina, voiced by Zoe Saldana, whose late husband created a map that'll help them find their way through the Himalayas and possibly where the Yeti might be staying. Is it Yeti or Yetis? Like, what's the plural of Yeti? I think it's just Yeti. I don't know. I'm just leaving that part in. So this movie has the usual quality you can expect with a Laika film. The thing you gotta remember is that Laika doesn't make movies, they craft movies. The detail, the composition, the shots, the lighting, the color, every moment of this movie was absolutely gorgeous. There were a lot of really well animated action scenes and chase scenes, and the animation is just mind-blowing considering that it's almost entirely practical. Laika continues to prove that they are the undisputed champions of stop motion. And one thing I do love about Laika films is that during the credits they usually show some kinda behind the scenes footage, sort of. In this movie they showed a scene where they're traveling and they have a camera set up on a different angle so that while the movie is going in its normal time, you can see the animators sort of speeding around, moving the characters, moving all the scenery and everything. It's really well done, and I always like when they show a lot of behind the scenes stuff. As far as the story goes, it's pretty simple and straightforward, unlike some previous Laika productions, so it doesn't quite reach the epic scale that Kubo and the Two Strings did, but despite the story being simple, the characters were still pretty complex. Lionel, while very well-meaning and a man of his word, is almost entirely focused on just his own goals and his own agenda. Even though he does plan to help out Mr. Link, he doesn't really consider the feelings of him or really anyone else around him. One thing I gotta say about Lionel is I'm glad they didn't play the betrayal angle with him, because there was a lot of opportunity for that to happen. Like, he would, show up back in England with Bigfoot and hand him over to some scientists or something for, his own glory, or getting into that explorers club. But no, they didn't do it. He stuck to his word, he got him to the Himalayas, and I'm really glad that they didn't go with that cliche. And as for Adelina, because her husband had passed away, she had pretty much confined herself to her house and never went anywhere, and missed out on some potential adventures, but now that Lionel and Mr. Link are on an adventure, she tags along, and now has an opportunity to do so. I think the overall messages behind this movie is being able to accept progress. In other words, evolving past old ideals in order to accept new ones, as well as considering the place that you think you want to be may not be the place where you truly belong. And that is a very powerful message. So while I did enjoy this movie quite a bit, I do have a couple of gripes, and one pretty big gripe, but we'll get to that one. The first one is Adelina, because the way she joined the party was a little strange. The whole thing was that she had the map that her late husband made, and then Lionel went to go see her, and then they implied that they had an affair in the past or something like that. And he was trying to convince her, and she was like, no, get out of my house, get out of my house. So then he robs the house, in a fairly funny sequence, by the way, and he steals the map, and then she chases after him with a gun, even, and then she just suddenly decides to turn and says, you were right, I'm a bird trapped in a cage, I want to come with you. And I'm like, you should be more angry at him. She accepted that way too easily. There was also one scene toward the end of the movie that I thought was a bit weird. It was Lionel hanging off of a cliff with Adelina tied to him, and then Bigfoot tied to her at the very end, and he's like hanging off the cliff, and I'm like, he's got to be holding up hundreds, if not thousands of pounds of just Bigfoot alone, plus Adelina. And I know they established that he's very strong and very fit in this movie, but come on, man. I know it's Hugh Jackman, but he's not playing Wolverine right now. There was also some deaths in this movie, by the way, and they were mostly off-screen deaths. And one in particular, I thought was fairly gruesome. It happened very quickly, and I'm not going to spoil much about this, but I'm pretty sure that if you watch this one frame by frame, it gets pretty disturbing. Also, one person who died, I didn't think they really deserved it. Again, I'm not going to spoil anything because this person was on the bad guy side, but there were moments in this movie where they seemed to maybe reconsider their position because the main bad guy was absolutely crazy. And there were scenes where he was going off and that character was just kind of standing there going, maybe I should find a new job. But then, yeah, the end of the movie, there was a death scene, and I thought, wow, that person didn't really deserve it that much. And I think my biggest gripe with this movie was the way it was initially advertised. So, way back when this movie was first announced, when it was just Movie 5 or whatever, they described it as a traveling around the world comedy or something like that, something along those lines. But they said comedy, and there wasn't really a lot of comedy in this movie. There was a lot of funny moments, don't get me wrong, but if you watch the trailer, I think that is mostly all of the funny moments because they had to make the trailer, you know, entertaining and everything. But there were a lot of opportunities where I feel like this movie could have been a lot funnier. I mean, they didn't have to go overboard or anything, but there were just moments where it's like, okay, you know, add another joke or two, you know, punch it up a little bit. But yeah, that was kind of disappointing. There's a lot of talking and a lot of exposition and all that, and it's all great. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like it just needed a few more jokes just to break things up a little bit. Again, not going overboard, but you know, just for a little bit more levity. And I do feel like there were moments where they were trying to be funny, but it just didn't really work. Like there's a scene where they have to visit this old woman and get some information. So her daughter, you know, takes her to her, and before they go into her house, her daughter's like, "Whatever you do, don't mention the chicken." And I'm like, what are you talking about? So they go in, and the old lady has a chicken on her head. And that's it, I guess. So what's the joke? She has a chicken on her head that we're not supposed to talk about? I mean, what? What is that? And they did bring it up a few times, you know, I guess, again, trying to be funny, and every time they bring up a chicken, she's like, "What chicken?" And that's the joke? I guess I really don't understand it. It just seemed kind of unnecessary. But those are mostly minor nitpicks, and I don't think it really ruins anything. So I do highly recommend this movie. I think it's excellent, and it definitely deserves more support because, well, it didn't do so well during its opening weekend from what I've read. The good news is it was a fairly cheap movie. I think I read it cost only about $7 million to make. And its opening weekend, I think it made about $5, so I have no doubt that it will definitely make its money back, but it certainly didn't get the support it deserves, and it might also be because it came out during kind of a crowded weekend for movies. There were a lot of premieres this weekend, and honestly, from what I've been seeing by like Rotten Tomato scores and IMDb scores, this is definitely one of the higher rated movies of that weekend. And I bet people who went to go see Hellboy really regretted going to see Hellboy and not this. I have to admit, I do worry a lot about Laika because this just keeps happening to them. It happened with Kubo and the Two Strings. I know that because not many people went to go see that, and they should have because it was a great movie. But for some reason, they just never get the numbers, and it's a shame because their movies are so well crafted and the stories are really good. It's like someone really wanted to tell a story and they presented it using all this great practical animation, and they just never perform properly, and I do think that is a shame. Laika deserves a lot better, and I really don't know what the future holds for that studio. Maybe they'll move away from the theater and go straight to Netflix or something. That might work out a little bit better for them. I know a lot of studios are doing that now because, it's hard to compete with Disney right now. So I really hope people do support this movie and go see it because it's definitely worth watching. If it's still in the theaters when you're watching this video, definitely go check it out. Maybe when it comes out on Blu-ray you can buy that or watch it on a streaming service. It definitely deserves a lot more support, and hopefully if it gets enough, we'll get to see more great stop-motion films in the future. But that's all I got for Missing Link. Leave a comment below and let me know what you thought of it. My name is Rob, and have a wonderful day.